Hey, welcome to my coding vlog. Glad you're here. Before we jump into building anything cool, we gotta lay the groundwork. That means choosing a backend framework, setting up the database, and figuring out how users will log in. If you've built full-stack apps before, you know how important this early setup is. Get it right, and everything else goes smoothly. But before we dive in, let me quickly remind you what this project is all about. We're building a smart household chore management app, something that helps people organize, assign, and track chores in a shared space, like a flat or a family home. The idea is to have both a web interface and a mobile app, where users can see the rooms, add tasks, and mark them as done. Eventually, we'll even integrate RFID tags, so you can scan a tag in the kitchen, for example, and log a completed chore automatically. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so now that we know what we're building, let's talk about how we're gonna build it. Time to set up the tech stack. For this project, I'm going with AdonisJS. It's a full-featured Node.js framework that's heavily inspired by Laravel, so it gives you a real backend structure out of the box. And I know what you might be thinking, why not Express? Well, Express is great, but you have to build everything from scratch. With Adonis, things like routing, ORM, and Auth are already built in, which saves us a ton of time. For the database, I'm using PostgreSQL. And eventually, the frontend will be built in React, using Vite as the bundler. But today, we're all about the backend. So let's create our backend project. To create the project, we just run this command in the terminal. We want to create an API. Let's select Access Token Authentication. We'll see why in just a few seconds. And like I just mentioned, we're using PostgreSQL as our database. After a few seconds of installation, our project is now initialized. As we can see, all the files and folders have been successfully created. Now let's talk authentication. Adonis gives us three built-in options: session-based auth, basic auth, and access tokens. Session-based auth is great for traditional websites like a dashboard with cookies. But we're building something that'll live mostly on mobile, so sessions are out. Basic auth is too limited, you don't want to send your username and password on every request. That leaves us with access tokens. They're perfect for mobile apps, they're stateless, secure, and easy to store on the device like in the keychain or secure storage. Alright, let's dive into the code. Okay. Using AdonisJS's built-in commands, I started by generating a controller, we'll name it Auth, but Adonis automatically renames it to Auth controller, following the standard naming convention. This controller is where we'll define all the logic related to authentication. But before we jump into writing the methods, we need to handle validation, so we generate a validator file using the node ace command. In that file, we define a validator called register_validator. Here's how it works. This validator ensures that the full name is between 3 and 64 characters, that the email is valid and not already taken, that the password is at least 8 characters long. Once that's in place, we can move on to creating the user. But for that to work, we first need to define a user model. This will allow us to store and retrieve user data from the database. Here's what the model looks like. This setup gives us everything we need to manage users, including password hashing and access token handling. From here, we can now build our 4 core methods inside Auth controller: register, login, logout, and me. Let's walk through them one by one, starting with register. For the register method, here's what's happening. We start by retrieving the incoming request data, specifically the full name, email, and password. Then, before doing anything else, we validate this data using the register validator we just created. This way, we're making sure we only allow clean and expected input. Once the validation passes, we move on to creating the user. We use the user model, the one we just set up, and save the new user to the database. Finally, we return this new user in the response. Next up is the login method. It follows a very similar structure. First, we validate the credentials that the user sends, typically just the email and password. Then, if the credentials are correct, we generate an access token and assign it to the user. This token is what the user will use to authenticate future requests. We send both the token and the user's data back in the response. Now, the logout method is pretty straightforward. It simply revokes the user's access token, effectively logging them out of the app. And finally, the me method, this one is super simple. It just returns the data of the currently authenticated user. This is useful for checking who's logged in or fetching user-specific info after authentication. To make all of this work, we need to add the roots for each method in our roots file. Each root points to the corresponding controller method, and for some of them, like logout and me, we attach a middleware that checks if the user is authenticated. Here's a quick example. That auth middleware ensures that only authenticated users can hit this route. If the user isn't logged in, we redirect them to the login route or send back an error. And just like that, we've got a full authentication flow: register, login, logout, and check who's logged in, all built into our AdonisJS backend. So now, on the mobile side, here's how it's gonna work. The user opens the app, enters their email and password, and we send that to our API. If it's correct, we get back an access token, which we store securely on the device. Then, every time we make a request to the API, like marking a task as done, we include that token in the headers. No need for cookies, no session to manage, just a clean API-driven setup. Alright, that's it for the backend setup and authentication. In the next episode, we're diving into the actual features, like creating rooms and chores. We'll define the models, set up the first migrations, and start exposing roots so the app can interact with the data. And eventually we'll hook that up to RFID tags so you can just scan and log a task instantly. But we're not there yet. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you're enjoying this format. If you want to follow along and build something similar, just subscribe. Don't forget to like, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!